"Monkey, this seat isn't for you." The words didn't just fall. They detonated. Passengers froze mid-breath. The hum of the engines seemed to vanish. Every eye in first class turned toward row 2, where a black woman in midnight blue silk sat, perfectly still, her fingers resting on a leather purse. The captain stood over her, silver hair slicked back, uniform crisp, authority radiating like heat. He leaned down, a finger stabbing the air an inch from her face. His tone wasn't a whisper. It was a verdict. "You think you belong here? You don't. People like you don't." The woman's eyes rose slowly, locking on his. No tears, no protest. Just a stillness that unsettled the room more than any outburst could have. She had heard this before in lobbies, in offices, in boardrooms where her presence was questioned. But never this naked, this public. A man across the aisle shifted uncomfortably, pulling out his phone. A younger flight attendant, fresh-faced, clutched her service pad tighter, eyes darting from the captain to the passenger, back again. She looked like she wanted to intervene, but fear sealed her lips. The insult lingered in the air, thick as smoke. The captain straightened, voice louder now, ensuring the whole cabin heard. "Stand up. This seat's reserved for a real guest, not you." Gasps, a mutter, a cough breaking the silence. The woman didn't move. Her chin lifted a fraction higher. Her silence wasn't weakness. It was defiance carved into stone. And then shadows shifted. From the aisle, a tall figure emerged, broad-shouldered in a tailored black suit, stride measured, gaze locked. His presence carried a gravity the room hadn't felt yet. Passengers leaned forward instinctively, sensing the tension about to rupture. The captain hadn't noticed him. Not yet. He was too busy spitting orders, too sure of his power. But the man approaching did notice. Every detail, every word, because the woman in that seat humiliated before strangers wasn't just another passenger, she was his wife. And he wasn't just another man boarding quietly. He was the CEO who signed the captain's paycheck. First class was meant to be quiet. Plush leather seats, silver trays polished to a mirror, a calm space above the clouds, where the world's noise stayed on the ground. But for her, quiet never lasted long. She sat alone in seat 2 amperes, posture composed, dress a dark satin that caught the cabin lights with every movement. No assistant, no entourage, not even a laptop open in front of her. Just a woman traveling alone, holding a purse like it was the only shield she needed. Passengers glanced at her the way people sometimes do, half curiosity, half suspicion. To them, she was just another face, another traveler in the wrong place. And that was exactly how she intended it, because anonymity was safer, until it wasn't. She had boarded without spectacle, ticket scanned, boarding pass printed under her real name. She knew the rituals of air travel by heart. Present ID, nod politely, move forward. Nothing unusual, nothing that should trigger questions. But she also knew too well that questions always came. The captain's outburst had already rewritten her presence. In one insult, she went from guest to intruder. And now, with dozens of eyes fixed on her, she could feel the unspoken verdicts forming. Some passengers leaned back, unsure whether to believe the uniform or the woman. Others leaned forward, phones in hand, the faint glow of their screens catching the tension. She remained still. This wasn't new. She remembered being 25, waiting in a hotel lobby in Atlanta. The clerk had said the same words, softer but no less cruel. "You don't look like someone who belongs here." She had slept in her car that night. She had built an empire on that memory. And here it was again, echoing at 30,000 feet. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself. Every insult was a test. Every humiliation, a mirror of someone else's fear. She had learned to pass those tests without breaking. The young flight attendant, barely older than a college intern, hovered near the galley, shifting from one foot to the other. Her lips parted, then pressed shut. She wanted to speak, but the chain of command was heavy. Too heavy. Across the aisle, the man with his phone whispered, "This doesn't feel right." His companion nudged him to be quiet, but the camera was already recording. A tiny red dot blinked, unseen by the captain, but not by her. Her hand rested lightly on her bag. Inside, her phone buzzed once. A preset alert. She didn't move to answer it. Not yet. Timing was everything. To the cabin, she was a silent figure pinned beneath authority. To the captain, she was a nuisance delaying his schedule. To the strangers watching through glassy eyes, she was a test of how much humiliation one woman could take before she broke. But she knew something none of them did. This wasn't the first time someone tried to erase her. And it wouldn't be the last time they failed. The captain wasn't finished. "Steward!" he barked, voice sharp as a whip crack. "Get her out of this seat." A tall attendant appeared from the galley, chest puffed with borrowed authority. He glanced at the captain, then at the woman in 2 amperes, and smirked. "Ma'am, economy is that way," he said, pointing down the aisle like he was directing traffic. The woman didn't move. Passengers shifted in their seats, the atmosphere charged. A cough, a whispered, "Unbelievable," the faint click of another phone camera powering on. One man near the window leaned toward his wife. "She probably snuck up here," he muttered. His wife frowned but said nothing. The young trainee attendant lingered near the service cart, gripping the handle until her knuckles whitened. She'd seen the boarding pass scan green. She knew the seat was valid, but her voice stuck in her throat, tangled in the hierarchy of the uniform. The captain folded his arms, his silver pilot wings glinting under cabin lights. "This is first class," he announced loudly enough for the entire cabin. "Reserved for premium passengers, not for people who—" He stopped, just short of repeating the word he had already used. But the pause carried the same poison. Someone in row 4 muttered, "This is wrong." Another voice, sharper, replied, "Maybe she forged the ticket. Happens all the time." The tide of whispers grew. Disbelief mixed with complicity, a chorus of strangers deciding whether she was victim or fraud. The tall attendant leaned closer, lowering his voice but not his disdain. "Best not to make a scene, ma'am. Folks like you don't want trouble." Her chin lifted a fraction. Trouble wasn't something she feared. Trouble was something she had learned to use. A phone clicked, flashless, discreet. The man across the aisle was recording again. The red dot blinked, capturing every word. He whispered into the mic, "This is discrimination. Everyone needs to see this." The captain caught sight of the phone. His jaw tightened. "Put that away," he snapped. But the passenger didn't lower it. He only angled it higher, as if daring the man in uniform to try. The woman's hands never left her lap. Her silence filled the space the way thunder fills a valley before the strike. The captain leaned closer, his tone colder now. "This is my plane, and on my plane I decide who belongs in this cabin." The words hung like smoke, authority claimed. Authority abused, and yet beneath the hum of engines and the whispers of doubt, a different energy stirred. Small, quiet, but growing. The sense that something wasn't right, that this moment would not pass unnoticed. She didn't move. Not yet. Timing was everything. The insult had been thrown. The orders barked. The whispers spread like wildfire, and still she did not move. Her body remained anchored in seat 2 amperes, hands folded neatly in her lap, gaze steady on the middle distance. No shouting, no pleading, no frantic gestures to prove her worth. Just stillness. That silence was louder than anything in the cabin. The captain's authority cracked against it. His words landed like stones on glass, but the glass refused to shatter. He shifted uneasily, though he masked it as irritation. The tall attendant glanced back, waiting for compliance that never came. The woman's breathing was even, almost rehearsed. Years of practice had taught her this response. Hold, wait, let the world reveal itself. She wasn't frozen, she was calculating. A woman 2 rows back leaned into her husband. "Why isn't she saying anything?" she whispered. Her husband shrugged, uncomfortable. Maybe she knows she's caught, but the truth was different. Silence was her weapon. The young trainee couldn't take her eyes off the passenger. The calm unsettled her more than anger would have. People shouted. People begged, that was expected. But this woman sat like she was carved from the same steel as the aircraft itself. The trainee's chest tightened with an emotion she couldn't name. Respect, fear, both. The captain leaned down again, voice sharp. "Ma'am, I will not ask again. Stand up or you will be escorted out." No reaction. The silence stretched so long it became unbearable. The hum of the engines returned to the foreground, a low reminder that time was moving even if the confrontation was not. Passengers shuffled in their seats. A baby fussed somewhere down the aisle, quickly hushed. The recording phone captured it all. The uniform's authority, the smirk of the tall attendant, the stillness of the black woman in seat 2 amperes. Later, people online would call it the silence that broke him. Right now, it was just tension. The woman's eyes flicked briefly to the side, catching the red dot of the camera. Just a fraction of a second, but enough. She knew. Witnesses mattered. The captain bristled. "You think staying quiet helps you? It doesn't. Silence won't save you." But the silence wasn't about saving. It was about exposing. Every word he added, every second she refused to move, tilted the scales further against him. Passengers felt it. Some shifted uncomfortably, sensing the imbalance. Others sat rigid, eyes flicking between the captain and the woman like spectators at a match no one had paid to see but no one could leave. She inhaled once, slow and deliberate, and exhaled just as measured. A breath that said, "I am not moved by you." For the first time, the captain blinked. Just once. Just enough to show that something inside him recognized the shift. Silence had spoken, and the cabin leaned in, waiting for what would come next. The cabin wasn't silent anymore. It started with the faint glow of a phone screen in row 4. A man in a gray blazer, his jaw tight, angled the lens toward the captain and the woman in 2 amperes. He whispered into his mic, "This doesn't look right. I'm recording." His seatmate, a woman with auburn hair, pulled her phone too. "This is wrong," she muttered, pressing record. The red dots multiplied, tiny beacons catching the injustice in real time. The captain noticed. His lips curled into a thin line. "Put the phones away," he snapped. "This is private airline business." But the command fell flat. No one lowered their cameras. If anything, more screens lit up. Quiet resistance humming through pixels. The young trainee at the galley gripped her notepad, pulse racing. She had scanned the ticket herself. It was valid. She had seen the system flash green, but when the captain declared otherwise, her voice froze. Now, seeing passengers with phones raised, she felt a surge of something, maybe courage, maybe obligation. Her lips parted. "Sir, I think," she began. The senior attendant cut her off sharply. "Stay out of this, rookie." Her face flushed, but she didn't step back. She tucked her notepad against her chest, eyes locked on the woman in 2 amperes. Passengers exchanged whispers. "She's got a ticket. They're profiling her." Can they even do that? The woman remained still, gaze steady, silence unbroken. Her presence had become the center of gravity, pulling phones, pulling eyes, pulling conscience. One man, middle-aged, leaned across the aisle and said louder than a whisper, "I saw her boarding pass. She showed it." His voice cracked, but it carried enough weight to ripple through the row. The captain spun toward him. "Sir, remain seated. This is not your concern." But it was already everyone's concern. Screens flickered, videos uploaded. Hashtags appeared in real time. Number first class disgrace, number flying while black. The young trainee's thumb hovered over her phone. She tapped the record button quietly, screen hidden against her apron. The audio captured every insult, every command, every second of silence. She didn't know if she'd ever use it, but she needed proof. The tall attendant scoffed at the passengers filming. "Don't waste your time. No one's going to believe her." The woman in 2 amperes didn't even turn her head. But the cameras did. They caught his smirk, his dismissive tone, his arrogance. It was recorded now, unerasable. From the back row, a teenager whispered to his mother, "She hasn't said a word." The mother nodded, eyes narrowed. Sometimes silence is the loudest answer. And in that silence, the story shifted. This was no longer just one woman against a captain. It was a woman and a cabin full of witnesses, phones raised, truth captured in pixels. The captain straightened his uniform, jaw clenched. He still thought he held control. But with every camera rolling, every whisper turning into words, that control was slipping fast. And she knew it. The captain's voice rose, sharp and commanding, slicing through the whispers. "That's enough. Phones down, voices down. This woman is in the wrong seat and she will be removed." End of discussion. But the discussion didn't end. It multiplied. Passengers leaned toward each other, whispers louder now, defiant. The red dots of recording phones blinked across the cabin like scattered stars. The tall attendant stepped forward again, puffing up his chest as if to mirror the captain's authority. His voice dripped with mockery. "You're embarrassing yourself, ma'am. Everyone here can see it. People like you don't just slip into first class without trying something." Gasps rippled. The woman in 2 amperes didn't flinch. Her hands stayed folded neatly in her lap, eyes forward, silence holding the room like a vice. But the passengers reacted. One woman in row 3 hissed, "Did he just say people like you?" A man across the aisle whispered, "Unbelievable. He can't say that." The trainee attendant's jaw tightened. She shifted forward, her small voice cutting through. "Sir, I scanned her boarding pass. It was valid." The captain turned on her, voice like steel. "Quiet. That's an order." She froze, face pale, but her words had landed. Passengers heard. Phones recorded. The crack in the facade widened. The captain straightened, trying to reassert control. This seat belongs to a platinum-tier guest arriving shortly. You will move, or you will be escorted out by security when we land. Ugh. The lie was obvious. The woman across the aisle shook her head, muttering, "There's no such thing as a reserved seat after boarding. He's making this up." The tall attendant sneered, doubling down. "She's stalling. Fraud always stalls. Best to drag her out before she causes more trouble." That broke the thin thread of restraint in the cabin. Someone in row 5 said loudly, "This is discrimination. Plain and simple." Another voice echoed, "Yeah, let her sit. She paid for it." The captain's face flushed red, authority unraveling with each objection. He slammed a hand against the seat back, startling the nearby passengers. "This is my plane. I decide who stays." She goes. The cameras caught everything. The slam, the rage, the words. The woman in 2 amperes still hadn't moved. She remained a stone in the storm, letting the chaos swirl around her. Her silence sharpened every insult, magnified every abuse, turned the crew's aggression into evidence against themselves. The tension was unbearable now. The hum of the engines seemed louder, the air denser, and beneath it all, something was shifting. The cabin wasn't leaning toward the captain anymore. They were leaning toward her. She hadn't said a single word, and already, the balance of power was tilting. The captain leaned in, closer than before, so close his shadow stretched across her lap. His eyes narrowed, his lips curved into a thin, poisonous smile. "You're wasting my time," he said, voice low enough to sting but loud enough for the row to hear. Then the words slipped out, deliberate, sharpened like a blade. "People like you don't belong here. You're nothing but a monkey in silk." The cabin gasped, as if oxygen had been ripped away. A woman in row 3 dropped her water bottle. A man in the back muttered, "Did he just?" But his voice was drowned by the collective shock. The insult hung in the air, heavy, undeniable, unforgettable. The tall attendant smirked, as if the captain had said what he'd been thinking all along. But the trainee's face went pale, her hands trembling against her notepad. Her voice cracked out, unplanned, uncontainable. "Sir, that's racist." The words rang louder than she intended, echoing in the stunned silence. Phones captured it instantly. A teenager's camera zoomed in, subtitles ready for the internet. "That's racist." The captain whipped his head toward her, fury flashing. "Enough out of you," he barked, but it was too late. The damage was done. The woman in 2 amperes still didn't move. She sat like stone, unyielding, her face calm but her eyes burning with something deeper memory. She remembered being 16 in a Charlotte hotel lobby, told to wait outside where you belong. She remembered being 25 in Atlanta, sleeping in her car after being denied her room. Every insult layered into her bones. And now, here, at 30,000 feet, those ghosts returned in the mouth of a captain who thought his wings made him untouchable. But the cabin wasn't with him anymore. A voice from row 5 shouted, "That's enough." Another from row 2, "You can't talk to her like that." Phones tilted higher, capturing every angle. The word monkey repeated in whispers, outrage echoing. The captain realized too late what he had unleashed. His authority no longer shielded him, it exposed him. The tall attendant, still blind to the shift, muttered, "She should be grateful we're even letting her." He didn't finish. A passenger snapped, "Shut up, we're filming this." The woman in 2 amperes finally moved just slightly. She tilted her chin, lifted her eyes, and locked on the captain. Her silence was no longer defense. It was judgment. The cabin wasn't neutral now. It was charged, alive, electric. She had spoken no words, but the truth had been spoken for her, by witnesses, by outrage, by the unbearable weight of what everyone had just heard. The storm had broken, and the captain had no idea the real reckoning hadn't even started. The insult still echoed in the cabin air, thick and poisonous. Phones were raised like torches in the dark, capturing the moment a captain crossed a line no uniform could protect. And through it all, she hadn't spoken. Not once. Now she moved. Her hand slid into her purse with slow, deliberate calm. Not frantic, not defensive, just precise. She drew out her phone, its screen lighting her face in a soft glow. A single tap, one message, 3 words. "It's happening." No one around her knew what those words meant. But on the other side of the signal, someone did. Somewhere beyond this cabin, beyond the hum of engines, systems were already in place. waiting for her command. She set the phone back in her lap, screen down. Her expression didn't change. The captain sneered. "Text whoever you want, it won't save you." But the smirk faltered when she didn't respond. She didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She simply sat, gaze steady, as though every word he spoke was being weighed and stored like evidence in a trial. And in a way, it was. The man in row 4 leaned closer to his camera, whispering for his live stream audience. "She just sent a message. She's calm. Too calm. Something's going on." The young trainee attendant glanced at her phone tucked in her apron pocket. She saw the passenger's stillness, the way her fingers rested lightly on the screen, and something inside her shifted. This wasn't a woman cornered. This was a woman waiting. The tall attendant rolled his eyes. "She thinks she's clever, but she's just stalling." The woman's silence answered him louder than words could. A teenager near the back muttered, "She's not scared at all." His mother whispered back, "No, she's letting him dig his own grave." The engines hummed beneath their feet, steady, relentless, as though the plane itself knew momentum was shifting. Her phone buzzed once, unseen by the crew. A confirmation. The system was awake. She exhaled, slow and deliberate. Her mind was clear, her body still. On the surface, just a passenger refusing to move. But beneath, the counterstrike had already begun. The captain leaned in again, voice dripping with false authority. "You're finished. Do you hear me?" Finished. But in her silence, the cabin heard something else entirely. Not defeat, not fear, preparation. And the man walking quietly up the aisle, the one no one had noticed yet, was about to turn that preparation into reckoning. The aisle parted before him without a word. A tall man in a black suit moved steadily up the cabin, his stride deliberate, his presence impossible to ignore. Broad shoulders filled the narrow aisle, polished shoes striking softly against the carpet. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. Every step carried weight. The first few rows noticed him first, then the ripple spread. Heads turned, whispers scattered like sparks. "Wait, is that? No way. It can't be." The captain was still looming over seat 2 Amperes, locked in his own fury, too focused on the woman's silence to sense the shift behind him. His words spilled, brittle and desperate. "You're nothing here. Nothing. And when we land, security will drag you out like the fraud you are." But the threat lost its bite the moment the suited man stopped in the aisle just behind him. The woman in 2 Amperes lifted her eyes. Their gazes met. For the first time since the confrontation began, her stillness softened, not submission recognition. Her husband had arrived. A passenger gasped. "That's Marcus Carter." The name rolled through the cabin like thunder. Others repeated it in hushed tones. Some didn't know it yet, but they would. Because Marcus Carter wasn't just a man in a suit. He was the CEO whose signature inked the paychecks of half the airline staff, including the captain standing inches from his wife. The tall attendant noticed first, his smug grin faltering. His posture straightened, but his eyes darted nervously between the captain and the man behind him. The young trainee froze, eyes wide, hand pressed to her notepad. She had heard the name before, whispered in corporate memos, mentioned in news articles. Now here he was in her aisle, in her shift, in this very storm. The captain finally sensed the silence behind him. He turned, irritation sharp on his face until recognition struck. His expression faltered, composure cracking like glass under heat. Marcus Carter didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. His presence was language enough. The cabin itself seemed to lean toward him, the balance of power shifting with his arrival. Passengers whispered louder now, no longer sure if they were watching a scandal or history. Phones tilted higher, recording the moment the story bent. The captain tried to recover, clearing his throat. "Sir, this doesn't concern you. I'm handling a situation." Marcus's eyes cut through him like a blade. He took one more step forward, standing tall behind the seat where his wife sat silent, steady, unbroken. "This concerns me," he said, voice low but carrying through the cabin. "Because that woman you just humiliated is my wife." The words landed like a gavel strike. The cabin erupted not in chaos, but in charged silence. The truth had stepped into the aisle, and it was dressed in a black suit. The captain swallowed hard, but his authority was already slipping through his fingers. The reckoning had arrived. The name Marcus Carter traveled down the cabin like a current. Passengers leaned into one another, murmurs swelling into recognition. Phones zoomed, whispers sharpened. "That's him. That's the CEO." "The airline's CEO?" "No, bigger. the CEO who owns half the airline stock. The captain's jaw tightened, his polished authority unraveling. His eyes flicked between the man in the suit and the woman he had just called monkey. For the first time, he saw not a powerless passenger, but a mirror of his own downfall staring back. The tall attendant shifted uneasily, his smirk gone. His hands, once firm on his hips, fidgeted at his sides. He whispered to the captain, "Maybe we should ease off." "Quiet," the captain snapped. But the word lacked force now. It rang hollow, brittle. The young trainee clutched her notepad so tightly the edges bent. Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out anyway. "I told you her boarding pass was valid." Her voice carried further than she expected. Passengers heard. Phones caught it. A ripple of agreement surged. Someone in row 5 called out, "We saw it. She belongs here." Another voice added, "You can't erase that now. We're filming everything." The captain raised a hand, but it wasn't authority anymore. It was desperation. "Enough. Everyone calm down. This is my aircraft and I decide—" "No." The interruption was quiet, steady. Marcus Carter's voice. His presence cut the captain's sentence in half like a blade through paper. The passengers went still again. "This isn't your aircraft," Marcus continued, eyes locked on him. "You fly it. I own it." Gasps. A hand clapped over a mouth in disbelief. Phones tilted higher. The tide had turned. The captain's face flushed, beads of sweat forming at his temple. He looked at the attendants for support, but the tall one stepped back. His smirk was gone. His loyalty evaporated. The young trainee didn't move away. She stood straighter, finally unshackled. "He's right," she said softly, but clearly enough for the row to hear. "You went too far." Now the cabin itself seemed to pulse with energy. The balance of power had shifted. The passengers weren't watching in silence anymore. They were witnesses, jurors, an audience for justice. The woman in 2 amperes hadn't spoken, but she didn't need to. Her stillness was no longer mistaken for weakness. It was revealed as control. The captain opened his mouth again, but no words came. His authority had evaporated in the presence of truth, and the whole cabin could feel it. The stage was set. The collapse had begun. Marcus Carter didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The calm in his tone was sharper than any shout. "You insulted my wife," he said, words slow, deliberate. "On an aircraft my company owns. In front of witnesses. On camera." The captain swallowed hard, his face paling. "Sir? Mr. Carter, I don't—" Marcus cut him off, his gaze unblinking. "Don't explain. Don't excuse. You've already said enough." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was charged. Every passenger leaned forward, every phone camera steady, waiting for what came next. Marcus pulled out his phone, a sleek device that caught the cabin light. He tapped once, a direct line. The ring lasted seconds before a voice answered, clear and professional. "Corporate operations, this is Bennett." Passengers exchanged looks. This wasn't customer service. This was higher, much higher. Marcus didn't glance at the camera phones, but his voice was meant for them all. "Effective immediately," he said. "Captain Reynolds is suspended from duty. Grounds, harassment, and racial misconduct." Gasps filled the air. The captain's head snapped up. "You can't." "I can," Marcus said, his tone flat, final. "And I just did." Bennett's voice on the line confirmed. "Understood, Mr. Carter. Systems updated. Access revoked. Relief captain will be dispatched upon landing." The captain blinked, stunned. His wings, the very symbol pinned to his chest, suddenly felt like dead weight. His authority was gone, dissolved in seconds. The tall attendant stumbled back a step, muttering, This isn't how it works." But the passengers knew better. They had heard the call. They had filmed it. The truth was undeniable. Then it happened. The first clap. Row 4. A single passenger, unable to hold back. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the cabin filled with applause, not wild, not chaotic, but deliberate, sharp, each clap a verdict of its own. The young trainee's eyes shone. She clapped, too, her voice barely above a whisper, "Finally." The captain's face burned red. He tried to protest, but the sound of hands striking together drowned him out. His words no longer mattered. The cabin had chosen its side. The woman in 2 amperes finally shifted, lifting her chin higher. Still silent, still composed. She hadn't needed to say a word. Her dignity had spoken louder than the captain's rage ever could. Marcus lowered his phone, eyes never leaving the man in uniform. "You thought you owned this cabin," he said. But respect isn't yours to give or take. It's the foundation you just lost. The applause swelled again, echoing down the aisle, carried into every corner of the aircraft. The verdict was complete, and the captain was finished. The applause ebbed slowly, fading into a heavy silence. But it wasn't the silence of fear anymore. It was the silence of reckoning. Every passenger stared forward, their phones still raised, their faces lit by a mix of shock and awe. They knew they weren't just on a flight anymore. They were inside a story that would travel far beyond this cabin. The captain stood frozen, sweat beading at his temple, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. The wings on his uniform caught the light one last time, symbols that no longer meant anything. Marcus Carter stepped closer, his voice even, calm, but carrying enough power to reach every corner of the aircraft. "You thought silence meant submission," he said, eyes locked on the man who had just been stripped of authority. But silence can also mean strength. It can mean patience. It can mean the world watching while you bury yourself. His words sliced through the cabin like a final verdict. The woman in 2 amperes finally turned her head, eyes meeting her husband's. She hadn't spoken a single word since the beginning, but her gaze said everything. "I didn't have to fight. You let the truth fight for me." Marcus looked back to the passengers, acknowledging their raised phones, their stunned expressions. "Respect," he said, his tone firm, deliberate, "is not optional. Not here. Not in my company. Not on my planes." Gasps rippled. Then, slowly, nods. Passengers lowered their phones not because they were finished recording, but because they already had enough. Enough evidence. Enough truth. The young trainee attendant straightened, shoulders squared as if she had been waiting her whole career for this moment. She whispered to herself, but loud enough for the nearest rows to hear, "Never again. Not on my watch." The tall attendant stared at the floor, his arrogance dissolved. The power he thought he carried had evaporated into shame. The captain tried one last protest, his voice trembling. This isn't fair." Marcus didn't even flinch. "No, what you did wasn't fair. This is justice." And with that, the cabin was sealed in silence again, this time charged with relief, with recognition, with something like pride. One by one, passengers began to clap again, softer this time, but steady, not for drama, for dignity, for the quiet power of a woman who had sat through humiliation without breaking, and a man who had turned her silence into judgment. The flight continued. The engines hummed. But no one in that cabin would forget. Not the insult, not the verdict, and certainly not the moment the pilot lost his wings, not in the sky, but in the court of human decency. And as the cameras captured Marcus Carter returning to his seat beside his wife, the world was already preparing to hear the story. Justice didn't need to shout, it just needed to stand.